Nick, what do you have in front of you right now?
I have a Wheel of Destiny.
This is going to be a new annual tradition. For Oscar week, we have a spinning wheel of all Best Picture movies. Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to get a live result. So Nick, you have the honors to hit that spin button whenever you are ready.
And here we go. The wheel is spinning. The wheel is spinning. We are at... Oh, shit.
Hey, welcome in everybody. It's another episode of Just Play It. Although it's not technically just another episode. It's the Oscars this week, and we're doing something special. We're celebrating the Oscars by watching one of the Best Picture winners. Now, last week we spun a Wheel of Destiny, and Nick, what movie did we land on?
We landed on 1993's Schindler's List,
which won the Oscar for Best Picture in 1994. I'm not an award show person. Back in the day, I really looked up to it. I really admired the Oscars. And I don't know if it was because I was daydreaming of being there one day. And now I'm just, I have my shot in Hollywood, and I'm just jaded and bitter now. Maybe that's it.
No, I don't think you missed a shot in Hollywood. I'd say the reasoning is mostly the reason we don't like the Oscars, right? We've seen it as sort of this incestuous, political, power grabby kind of thing. I think stuff like Harvey Weinstein really affects the industry to where you're not sure how much you respect a lot of these people anymore, or maybe how much you should have. And you go, maybe we shouldn't have a full night to put these people on a pedestal. Maybe we should just watch the movie and move on.
Exactly. It becomes a little bit of a, I don't want to say pissing contest, but a little bit of rich people congratulating rich people.
Millionaires fighting with billionaires, fighting with millionaires. And at a certain point, just kind of gets old for me and my blue collar.
It all seems a little too much. It's subjective, but it exists, and it's the gold standard in America for how well your movie is doing and how well it's received. And if it deserves a gold trophy of a man named Oscar up on your fireplace mantle. The whole point of this spinny wheel, I was thinking, we're going to randomly select a movie we'd probably never watch because we're not Best Picture Oscar people, and we'll try and pick it apart and prove why it shouldn't have won the Oscar. But I gotta say, I didn't know we were coming out the gates like this. This is not a comedy.
This is in no way, shape, or form a comedy. This is in no way, shape, or form a fun watch. This is in no way, shape, or form a movie you sit down, get together with your friends, and say, let's watch Schindler's List together.
No, not at all. And this is a movie I have not seen before. I know, again, I say this every week. I am a movie guy. I love writing movies. I love creating movies. Me and Nick have shot many short films in our youth, in high school, semi-professionally in college. We love them, but I'm not one who's seen every single movie on earth. And now having watched it, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And we're not going to get into it in the same way we get into movies previously. We're not going to run through the plot. The goal of this episode is to review the general thoughts of the movies, the reception of the movie, just kind of really overview it, kind of where it stands in the Oscars, and get the spirit of the film here for those who haven't seen it, and maybe offer a different perspective for those who have.
Exactly. Like we said in the beginning, this is not going to be a regular episode where we run through the plot talk and pick it apart and go through every single thing. Not because this is a heavy movie, but that was the original intention of this special.
But also kind of because it's a heavy movie.
But also because it's extremely heavy and long. It's 3 hours. It is a 3-hour movie of going to hell and back. This movie was directed by Steven Spielberg, and fun fact, this was Steven Spielberg's first R-rated movie he directed. You kind of know him as the family fun summer blockbuster guy, but dipped his toes into the R-rated world, and he did it in a huge way.
Yeah, there's R-rated, and then there's heavy subject matter R-rated, and this definitely hits that and knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. I would say this is easily a top 3 Spielberg film. Some people, I think, probably have it top 5. You got E.T., Indiana Jones, stuff like that, but more fun movies. Nobody's enjoying this movie. So it's really hard to place it on a list anywhere.
But we will be rating it at the end because that's what we do.
Yes, we will.
For those of you who don't know much about this movie, I will read the log line. In German-occupied Poland during World War II, industrialist Oskar Schindler gradually becomes concerned for his Jewish workforce after witnessing their persecution by the Nazis. That's an accurate description because Oskar
Well, let's
Schindler,
dive into that. Is that an accurate description? As I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, I think it is because this is loosely based on a true story, correct?
Yes, and honestly, a little tighter than you might think.
What do you mean tighter? Like closer to what actually happened?
Right, as in the opposite of loose, right? This is pretty close to the way it went down. Obviously, I think Oskar Schindler is portrayed in a better way, from what I understand, than he was. He's obviously not as altruistic as in the movie. The end result was the same, right? The saving of anywhere between 1,100 and 1,200 Jews from the Nazi regime. This was written into a book by a relative of one of the survivors had commissioned someone to write a book about it. So there was a book subject matter about it that Spielberg was able to draw from. Obviously, anytime you put a book to film, you can't take it all with you. You got to leave some parts out. But for the most part, from my understanding, this is fairly close. The characters are at least real. All the characters are real.
I can appreciate that. I know when you are taking a true story and transferring it to a film, let alone to a novel and then a film, stuff gets enhanced, stuff becomes more crowd pleasing. And I was reading up on Oskar Schindler, and yes, there's articles saying, yeah, he wasn't really that much of a saint. He kind of just fell into this predicament. And yeah, maybe at the end he did become a changed man. But for this logline, no, going back to your question, I do think it's accurate because the way this movie starts out, Oskar Schindler, who's played by Liam Neeson, he doesn't necessarily have compassion or anything in the beginning for these Jewish people. It's just like a byproduct of war, and he is essentially just indifferent to it. He's thinking, oh, that sucks for them, but I guess I can use them in my factory. Would you say exploiting?
Very much so. He was an opportunist, right? His goal was he saw what was happening. He read the tea leaves, said this is what's happening in Germany, and I could use this as a way to make money, score political points. So he joined the Nazi party.
Correct.
Right. He was a Nazi. He wasn't just some industrialist in Germany at the time who had a Jewish workforce. He specifically went to Germany to become a Nazi to try and gain wealth.
Yes. I read up on him saying, yeah, he wasn't necessarily a saint, but I do think they portrayed that accurately in this movie. He's not a saint. There's even a couple scenes where he's like, hey, I'm not a charity. You can't be bringing there's a character with one arm, and he's super thankful that he gave him a job. And he goes up to his Ben Kingsley, like his accountant.
Yes, it was his accountant,
Stern,
his business partner. Correct.
Yeah. By the way, this movie, I won't say it's stacked with actor talent, but you got 3 heavy hitters right off the bat there: Liam Neeson, Ralph Fiennes, Ben Kingsley.
Oh, very much so.
You got some good help carrying your movie, Spielberg.
Yeah, and you also have Caroline Goodall, who was great. I know her from Hook, an all-time favorite.
Oh, another Spielberg movie.
Yeah,
that's a movie that came out before this. So you're like, the guy that made Hook made this?
Yeah. And Cliffhanger, she was around a lot in the 90s. So, no, I was actually going to mention Ben Kingsley because I know he was in the movie, and I saw this. We actually watched this back, believe it or not. There was a kind of cut down version of this, almost like a made for TV version of this that we watched in a high school film class.
I was going to ask, did we ever watch this at Redeemer?
No. No,
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of high school.
K through
For some
8. Yeah,
reason,
K through 8, you cannot show an 8th grader or younger.
I mean, we went and saw The Passion of the Christ in theaters when we were in 7th or 8th grade. Disclaimer, everybody, we went to a Christian school.
So,
So there's that. I mean, we saw that.
yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this would be something Mrs. Lanahan would pull. She's pretty real when it comes to teaching life lessons in history and just kind of like showing you what it is and having that make an impression on you. Shout out to Mrs. Lanahan. She's like our Mr. Feeney. She was our 3rd grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade teacher.
You never get into World War II, usually K through 8. That usually comes in high school, which I think why high school is kind of more that level. But I remember Ben Kingsley being billed in this. And as I was watching it again this time, I was trying to really point him out. And for some reason, and obviously he was much younger than he is now, a very recognizable face, he doesn't quite look like Ben Kingsley. They do a really good job.
I was looking at him, and again, I'm famously really good with faces. I was thinking, is that Ben Kingsley? And I was like, yeah, no, that has to be Ben Kingsley. And it was, after I checked it. Why did you say that? Just because he's younger, or?
I think they just did a really good job with the makeup, costume design, everything, right? Where they made a lot of these characters a little older, tattered, been through, hell. And so it was a little less of the Ben Kingsley I'm almost used to. Older, maybe a little more distinguished nowadays, but just felt a little different to me. To the point where he wasn't unrecognizable, but you're right, it does take a second to be like, yeah, that's Ben Kingsley. I wanted to ask you, James, that if you've never seen this movie, something that you'll notice right away is that this is shot in black and white. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Some say I am far from an intellectual, but I did notice that it was in black and white.
Perceptive.
It does start out in color, and I believe it fades into black and white. And by the end of the movie, it does go back to color. So I'm sorry, is your question how do I feel about it, or do I have thoughts on why that was done?
Yeah, did it add anything to the movie? Did it take away anything from the movie? How do you think it affected your watch of the movie?
My future wife, Emily, does not like to watch black and white movies. For me, it does not bother me. If I know something is in black and white, it kind of makes me not want to watch it, which is just a silly reason. But if it is, it's not a problem to me. With this watch, and I believe I may have read something about it, I believe Spielberg wanted to make it in black and white to really just highlight the depressing tone of the Holocaust, like the lowest of low, hell on earth. Black and white kind of helps sell that. It's bleak. There's no life. So I believe in the beginning where they're going from color, there's like a candlelit vigil or prayer with this Jewish family at a table, and they're free and they're human and they exist. Whereas the majority of this movie is in black and white, and it's all from the oppressive Nazis. The Nazis trying to erase the Jewish culture from history. There's literally monologue by Ralph Fiennes about halfway through the movie when he's talking in front of all these Jewish people that are in this. Is it an internment camp? Because it wasn't. They didn't go to Auschwitz till the end. So what was that beginning?
I'd refer to it as a work camp, as like a prison work camp.
Yeah, it was like a prison work camp, and he's talking to all these people and basically saying, hey, 600 years ago, you guys were doing this, and you claim to have achieved this, but now that doesn't exist. It's now a rumor. Today is history. We're erasing it. So really just the black and white use kind of added on to the horrible nature of what the Holocaust was.
And I think you could see Spielberg's intention with that, right? Because about halfway through the film...
Are you talking about the red jacket?
Oscar Schindler. Yeah. So Oscar Schindler goes ahead. He's watching basically this raid of a village going on by the Nazis. You can tell there's a lot of Jewish people in this village. And there's a small girl in a red coat. As you're looking at it, you realize the coat is actually red. Everything else is in black and white. The coat that she's wearing is in red, and she's walking through this town. And at the end of this little girl's saga that we see, she goes to hide under a bed. And as she hides under the bed, the red disappears.
The coat is not red. I did notice that.
Yes.
Do you have an answer or a take on that of why that was the choice? I do.
I think that was the first time Oscar Schindler started seeing them as people. So while she was in his gaze, she had color, right? That was humanity. It wasn't black and white. It wasn't depressing. There was a piece of humanity in the street. And then as she went to hide away, that humanity kind of disappeared. That's what I got from it.
I like your answer of Oscar Schindler seeing this young girl as a human more so than a tool for his workforce. I was curious as to why that decision was made. For whatever reason, I came up with an answer pretty quickly about why the red coloring disappears when she goes underneath the bed. So when Oscar Schindler is looking down at that town that's getting raided by Nazi soldiers, and they're basically exterminating Jewish people in the streets and the hallways, what is that girl doing? Is she kind of skipping free? It seems like she's just kind of running around and no one's paying attention to her.
What it looked like to me was how a child would look in a grocery store if they lost their parents.
Yes, okay.
And was just kind of wandering around lost, just looking for something.
This little girl is just being a little girl. She's just in her own world.
Innocent.
It's innocent. She is, in her mind, she's free. And the red coat is something for Oscar Schindler to zero in on, and us as the audience to get some sort of signifying clue that this is important. There's a message trying to be said here. So I believe with her kind of walking around ignorant to what's going on, she has that innocence with her. And then when she goes to hide underneath the bed, that's when her innocence dies. She realizes, I'm in trouble. I need to hide underneath this bed because my life is in danger and I'm a 6 or 7-year-old girl.
Yeah.
The kid inside of her died in that moment when she hid for her life. The answer for why the color went away came quickly, but thank you. Thank you for walking me through of why the color was there in the first place.
And I think another reason, two more reasons why I could come up with for the black and white decision. One is it almost felt like a newsreel back from the 40s. It made sure to tell you this is real. Right? There's no vibrant colors. Like this is how people saw it back then, right? This is almost news. It's real. It's black and white. It's how you'd view it. Even the footage itself is almost grainier from that time period. You could tell the footage isn't the best technology they had at the time in 1993. They chose to do a much more traditional film style. I'm not sure if this was shot on maybe an older kind of reel. That wouldn't surprise me. It seems like a Spielberg-y thing to do. And the other reason for me is I noticed for myself is that when I watch things in black and white, I have to pay a lot more attention.
It does draw your attention more for whatever reason. I think maybe things are a little bit more simpler.
Yeah.
I mean, not to sound redundant, but they're a little bit more black and white.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what the phrase comes from, right?
That's what I'm saying. You know,
Yeah.
it's pretty simple. The way you light a movie that's meant to be shot in black and white is different from a movie you would light that's going to be shot in color. Spielberg and anyone who directs a movie in black and white can kind of direct the audience's attention a lot more to certain parts of the screen.
So you can't just look at the full screen, see all the color. You have to focus in on what's going on a little more. I don't know if maybe my eyes are trained for color and the entertainment industry has me knowing where to look.
No, they know how to do that.
When, based on colors, sets, backgrounds.
Go towards the light.
Yeah, when it's in black and white, it really forces you into it. In this case, a harrowing way.
Going back to what you said about like a newsreel, there was a couple articles that said this reminds you of the documentary that was never made.
Yes.
You know, it's like if cameras were around, this is how it would look. Granted, it's a little bit more cinematic and the camera quality is better in the 90s than back then. But essentially, that's the feeling and the thoughts that come across your mind when you're watching this, because it is a little bit more immersive.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. Like, immersive is a great way to put it.
Just a heavy movie here.
Real heavy movie, and I'm going to make you relive it a little bit here.
Great.
In your mind, what do you think was the most powerful or iconic scene.
Okay, I had a similar question for you, and I'll just follow up with my answer with that question. The most powerful moment,
Yeah.
just one scene.
Just give me a scene that just really hit you.
There's that scene where I'm forgetting what this guy's occupation was.
Made the hinges.
Yes.
Is this the guy? Yeah.
So he made the hinges, and he gets brought out to basically get executed in cold blood by Rafe Fiennes' character. How the hell do you say his name? Amon Goth.
Almond Gaith.
Yeah, so Gaith brings him out, and this guy is ruthless. Rafe Fiennes comes in an hour into the movie, and you're like, oh, I forgot this a-hole was in this movie. This guy's showing up now. It was bad enough this first hour. Now this guy's going to come in and go all evil villain on us.
This is beyond evil villain, though.
He is he's just evil.
Villains usually have a goal in mind. Yeah, this is just the embodiment.
This is the embodiment of hate.
Yes, and inhumanity, 100%.
Exactly. So this scene, they bring this poor guy out basically to his knees, and they're about to shoot this guy, but the gun jams, and it goes click. And then the guy winces every time the gun clicks, and they're cocking the pistol. Did another pistol get handed to Gaith?
Yes, there were two pistols.
Yeah, and then that one jammed up too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was just like, that one's going to stick with me because this guy's thinking he's going to die every single time that gun clicks. And you can only imagine what's going through that guy's head. And on the flip side of that, you're thinking, this must be an act from above. This must be an act of God, because how can two guns jam on this poor soul? And then they finally just kind of let him go. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does Stern witness this? Because I believe he tells Schindler about it.
Yes.
Thus, Schindler recruits him for his pots and pans factory.
Yes, and I think that's what you just said, kind of the feeling that there was some sort of divine intervention there, because then afterwards what happens is he gets recruited by Schindler.
I am a huge Butterfly Effect guy, and I don't mean the movie. I've never seen that movie, The Butterfly Effect, with Ashton Kutcher.
Ashton Kutcher at his best, man.
Did you think we'd be bringing up Ashton Kutcher's The Butterfly Effect in this podcast? On this episode? No, you didn't.
Keep you on your toes.
I'm always thinking about that. Like, what if I never went to LA and met Emily? What if I never did this and met this person? What if I never did that? How would my life be? It would be a trajectory of complete different reality. I always love those moments in movies and in real life when a specific thing happens that alters the course of reality. And in this character's reality, he's alive and he gets to go to Oscar Schindler's company and keep on living, because these Nazis are gunning these guys down with no remorse, with no regard, with no good answers. They're pretty much just doing it for sport at a certain point. I'd say that's the scene that struck me the most, and I will probably remember the most.
What's wild about that scene is he wasn't making hinges fast enough for Amon Gaith's liking.
Right.
When he got brought out there, the Jewish man tries to explain to him that there was maintenance on the machines in the morning, and he was in the coal field or in the coal mines. He was doing something else. He wasn't doing that all day.
Herr Commandant, I beg to report that my heap of hinges was so unsatisfactory because the machines were being recalibrated this morning. I was put on to shoveling coal.
And as he's explaining this, you can see Ray Fiennes' character starting to get frustrated, right? Almost like starting to have to face some sort of humanity, right? Because that would be a humane decision to say, I was wrong. You are actually doing it. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Go back inside. But he can't bring himself to do it. And you see, it's not just that it keeps clicking and it doesn't fire. Ray Fiennes' character is getting so... I'm just going to keep saying Ray Fiennes' character because Amon Gaith is just a little... It twists my tongue a little bit. His full name is Rafe Nathaniel Twizzleton Wykeham Fiennes.
You gotta be shitting me.
Yeah, look him.
Twizzleton? What's your source on this?
Wikipedia, dog.
There's your problem.
So Ray Fiennes' character is getting visibly frustrated and angry until eventually he just hits him in the back of the head with the butt of his gun and walks away, storms off, because he's so frustrated because all he wanted to do was not hear that guy's story and treat him like an animal.
Give him his fair shot of explanation.
Yeah, I didn't want to hear that you were doing something else. I didn't want to hear that I needed a reason to kill you, essentially. And he gets so mad about it.
I forgot about that. And that's the wild part too, is because these guys want to just execute these people for little to no reason. It can basically be like you're arguing with me or you're not producing this thing fast enough. And then, yeah, this guy is given a small window of time to kind of present his case. And then us as audience members, you're feeling even more for this guy. And you're thinking, yeah, no, it's not his fault. It's just circumstances. They're legitimate excuses. It makes you want him to survive even more. And then when he does, it's at least some sort of W for the audience. Like, geez, this is a harrowing watch.
Well, I wanted to bring that up because I think that's what made this scene maybe a little extra powerful. So we're all used to, as watchers of movies, of very tense situations, right? There's a lot of tension in a lot of the movies we watch. However, we're used to those tense situations working out more often than not. And leading up to this point in the movie, there were a lot of tense moments in which it never worked out.
Correct.
Right. I'm thinking back to the raid on that apartment building with the guy playing the piano. And you had those that Jewish family hiding in the piano, and they try to leave and they make a noise, and you're like, oh, it's tense. It's not tense. They get slaughtered.
Yeah.
The engineer on the German army base, the Jewish engineer gal, who tried to tell them that the foundation...
Talking about the construction foreman?
Yes.
It's the opposite result of the Hinges engineer scene. So she's presenting her case, or she's essentially saying, hey, this structure we're erecting is not sound. The foundation's not sound. It's going to collapse. We need to do this correctly. And Ray Fiennes' character, Gaith, says basically to another soldier, hey, shoot this lady. One soldier's saying, well, the foundation's not right. Like, she's the construction foreman. We need to listen to her. And Gaith just says, we don't argue with these people. Shoot her on my command. And then they bring her in the background and then cut to her close up and then shoot her in the head. You just wasted such a good talent and life because of a stupid predicament. It was the opposite of what happened with the Hinges guy. That was the gun jammed up. He got frustrated and just said, screw it. I'm just going to smack this guy in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Did we say that this was a fun movie to watch?
Yeah.
Already? Because it totally wasn't.
Again, nothing had ever worked out for one of the Jewish people up to this point in the movie.
No, there was very little breaks. Very little breaks.
Maybe Helen Hirsch. For me, I think my most powerful scene, it's probably the most famous scene from this movie. It's a scene you'll see a lot towards the end when the rescued Jews are surrounding Oskar Schindler as they're about to finally make their escape out of Germany. And they give him a piece of paper, and he's given a ring by Ben Kingsley's character. The ring has an inscription, "He who saves one life saves the entire world." And Oskar Schindler finally has this breakdown where he says, I didn't do enough and I could have done more. Like, I wasted so much money. Because the biggest thing about this was this was all because he was wealthy. He was bribing Nazi officials. He was, he had all these Jewish workers and he was protecting them, but he wasn't producing anything. That's the crazy thing. He wasn't producing any goods. I don't know if they covered that in the movie or if that's from the real life story. And so he was buying basically cheap goods from overseas to ship into his factory to sell as his goods. He was bankrolling all of this, and he finally had this breakdown of I didn't do enough. And it's a really good scene. It's probably Liam Neeson at his best right there. You forget how good of an actor he is, right? He's a great action star these days. When you get a scene like that and you see him breaking down and giving his explanation, it really hits you. It hit me. It definitely had me welling up.
When you mention that he's a wealthy guy, and in the beginning of the movie, you're seeing he's kind of like almost like a swindler or some sort of guy like sending drinks to tables, and it seems like he's some sort of opportunity. Yeah. He's a big shot. He's all about money and getting women, which is true. Apparently, he wasn't that great to his wife, so he's again not a saint. Cheated with multiple women, but ultimately he had a legacy, and it outshined that. But just going back to how he is a rich guy, all about the flair and the cars. He's given this ring by these people he had essentially saved, and it's made out of this guy's crowns, like metal crowns in his teeth, and they melt it down. And he's looking at the ring in awe and like so thankful, and in his eyes and in his face, it seems like he's putting so much value into this ring. It's like a homemade project that a loved one gets you, and you value it more than $6,000 ring. He's really touched by this symbol of gratitude, and basically just, it embodies the lives that he saved. I thought that was a good moment too in that scene.
Very powerful.
I was going to ask you, well, one, how many times have you seen this movie?
This would be number 2.
I'll say this multiple times. I probably won't go out and watch this movie again. There's no need to. The only reason we did is because we spun a wheel and landed on it.
It's one of those ones that you have to watch once and you'll probably never want to watch again. I think they know that because you never see this on the cable channel rotation. This doesn't just pop up on Friday nights on TNT.
I was going to say, before you rewatch this specifically for our podcast, what were the things that you remembered from it? How long ago had it been?
So it had been in high school, would have been my junior year. So
you just saw this in class. So this is your first time sitting down and watching it in full by yourself, paying attention to it.
Correct.
So did you remember anything from your high school watch?
I remember the ending, right? The scene I just talked about. I definitely remember a lot of the raids, the German raids on the ghetto there. And I distinctly remember the scene where Liam Neeson is talking to, Oscar Schindler is talking to Helen Hirsch, who is the maid of Gaith. Amon Gaith takes a interest in one of these Jewish gals to be the maid. For lack of a better term, almost falls in love with her, but can't admit it. Schindler and Hirsch have a very powerful scene together where they talk about why he hasn't killed Helen Hirsch yet. So I remember that scene. And then the rest is a lot of a blur.
When I never watch this movie again, but when I think about it, what are going to be the things that I remember? Now, what do you think after viewing it this time? What are the things that stick out to you? And what are you going to remember this movie as when someone says, hey, have you seen Schindler's List? 10 years, 20 years down the road.
I'll remember a lot of it. This is one of those ones that burns in your brain when you watch it and pay close attention to it. A lot of the scenes we just discussed, the construction site, the engineer there, the guy with the hinges, obviously the ending, the actual list making scene, I thought was great when they're just going through names, and Ben Kingsley is just typing out this list. And then probably the girl in the red coat. But honestly, a lot of it, it's one of those movies where every scene is powerful in its own way, and it's hard to forget because it shouldn't be forgotten, if that makes sense. Like, you shouldn't block any of this movie out.
No, I was going to say, it's all going to be the striking imagery that I'll probably remember. The scenes we discussed, the executions in the street, like the gunshot lights from the windows. There's like a wide shot of that town that's getting raided, and each window just has gun flashes in this and during this night scene. It's like these poor kids and at the prison work camp crawling into like the toilets, essentially. The physical test with they bring in Hungarian prisoners, and they make them like run laps naked, hosing down the train cars. When Gaith is essentially assaulting Helen Hirsch in the basement while the party's happening upstairs. It's such contrasting feelings. This movie is a display of the lowest of low that humanity can achieve. It's essentially highlighting the worst of the worst crimes against humanity by humanity. And unfortunately, that's what's going to stick with me, and big reason why it's not going to be like, hey, you guys want to sit down and watch Schindler's List? It's like, no. It's like, hey, do you want to sit down and watch Jurassic Park, The Lost World? It's like, yeah, that's a better option. It's like, there's in no way, shape, or form is that a better movie, but I'd rather watch that than something that is just dark and depressing. But I will agree with you. This is a movie that everyone should see once.
It's important.
And I was going to say, with this movie coming out, I believe I was reading something along the lines of, after this movie came out, there was a lot more interest of learning about the Holocaust, at least in America.
I'm sure.
I don't know how much it was taught in schools or how much attention was paid to it or how many museums there were at that time, but I'm pretty sure the general interest and appreciation for these survivors really spiked after this movie came out.
Yeah, and I think the importance of this movie, and this might sound bad, but I'm going to say it anyway. When you have the ability to research something yourself, you'll stop at a certain point. When you've had enough, when you don't want to learn anymore, maybe it's a little too depressing. When you're watching it in an entertainment setting, you will sit and you will watch the whole thing. So I wouldn't say that, maybe it's not being taught or people don't care, but it's hard to show a lot of that reality to people in a non-entertainment setting. And so I think this really forced people to sit down, see it. Again, everybody knows what happens, but picture's worth 1,000 words. You can learn about it, but
what you're saying is correct.
So much different.
No, what you're saying is correct, because, let's say we can think about a horrible event hundreds of years ago. Maybe there's a genocide or a terrible war that happened 500 years ago. We're a little bit disconnected from that. This is very recent, first off.
Mm-hmm.
It's in recent history. Literally, our grandparents can remember this.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's not so much an entertainment setting, but I think the word you might have been looking for was an intimate setting. There's emotion in the display of this history lesson, because you can hear on the news, someone was shot and killed on the street on Tuesday, and then you're like, damn, that sucks. And then they may cut away to a family member that's being interviewed, and they're sobbing and they're crying, they're explaining how great of a person they were. They're humanizing this victim that you don't know at all. And now you're really feeling it. Now you're feeling it, and you're thinking about the people that you love and what it would be like to lose them. So really, it humanizes the moment. It puts the emotion in the moment, and it's a little bit more immersive. That's exactly what this movie does. It puts you into the Holocaust. It puts you into those intimate, terrible moments of pain and torture. Because you can read in a history book, yeah, they were put in these internment camps and they were, killed or tortured or whatever. But when it's being shown to you in such a passionate and intimate way, you're feeling it. You're witnessing it, and your heart's in it more. You're a little bit more invested, and you feel bad for these victims.
Definitely. And another thing we always have to do in these podcasts, whenever we watch a movie, we always have to take into account the time period, right? So you got to think 1993. That's all you had were history books. If you didn't go out and search for this information, it'd be really hard to find it. In today's age, right, you can find it just about anywhere. Documentaries are out there, YouTube videos, articles upon articles upon articles are out there. Back in 1993, if you weren't seeking out this information was not making its way into your hands. It's another reason why this was so powerful at the time, and why it sparked so much interest, because he will say, I read that in a history book in high school. I'm 45 now. I don't remember that. I don't remember learning about that. I don't remember seeing it like that or it being that bad. And so being able to put it out en masse to the public in a time when information wasn't at your fingertips.
Yeah, and films put passion and emotion into stories. That's what they're supposed to do.
They do.
You can read all the facts you can about historical events, but leave it to the great art of movies to make you feel for them.
So my next question I have for you, so you kind of alluded to it a little earlier. It is quite a hit cast, right? I don't know if I call it star-studded at the time, but it's a very good cast as we watch it today. And so who do you think gave the best performance in the movie?
Might be Ray Fiennes.
I think it's far and away Ray Fiennes.
One, he just plays a villain so well. That son of a bitch, Voldemort, really knows how to just be a bad person. He's I can't speak to it. I'm not an actor, but I imagine it must be difficult to play evil. I think it's fun to probably play an evil villain, but it must be pretty hard to portray yourself as the embodiment of hate itself. And he does a good job.
And to make the audience really hate you. That's how I know you're a great actor. If you play a antagonist and you get me to really hate you, like at the end when they're kind of wrapping up the movie and telling you about everything that happens after the events of the film, and you see him getting hung for his war crimes, I was happy. Like I actually had joy in my heart seeing this man being hung. I think he was far and away the best act, and that takes nothing away from Liam Neeson. It takes nothing away from Ben Kingsley and the rest of the cast. Was it Caroline Goodall and Embeth Davidtz who played Helen Hirsch? But
yeah, Embeth Davidtz. Yeah, because there's one thing where you're shouting and you're yelling and you have a lot of lines, but when you are supposed to stand there and look scared for your life and have the audience be captivated by your performance when you're saying no words, I think that does say a lot to her performance as well. So I will say Helen Hirsch. Next in line for me.
She did great. So I want to go ahead, if that's all right with you, and kind of get into the actual Oscars part of this film and kind of look at how it fared at the Oscars.
That was going to be the whole point of this special. We were going to talk about it, the context of the Oscars at the time, have a really fun time talking about this movie.
Well, let's get into that part then.
Let's make it fun, guys.
Let's celebrate the film.
Let's celebrate it.
So this one in the 1994 Oscars ended up with 12 nominations, 7 wins. It won an Oscar for writing, best picture, directing, film editing, music, cinematography, and art direction. And then the 5 categories it was nominated for, but didn't win was sound, costume design, makeup, and then actor, leading actor, and supporting actor.
Okay. Which of these categories are you gonna dive into?
I want to get into the actors category. Do you think that there is a part of the voting body, we'll say, because we see this in sports a lot of the times, right? Where if I give somebody the MVP trophy, I'll give someone else the best offensive player trophy. Right? I don't want you going home with too much hardware. Let me give you the best picture, and then let's spread the love around, because there's a lot of good movies that are made within the course of the year.
That's why awards are so subjective.
Right. So actor in a leading role, it ended up being won by Tom Hanks for his role in Philadelphia, which is another heavy movie and a very good movie. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen it or you're aware of it, but it's one of Hanks's. So it's Tom Hanks and it's Denzel Washington. It's about I believe Tom Hanks has AIDS and Denzel is his lawyer, and they're trying to win a court case over the rights of someone who has AIDS. Again, heavy subject matter, very poignant for the time. And so Tom Hanks ends up winning that Oscar. Liam Neeson, I don't know, they usually don't list second, third, fourth, but I'm guessing probably came in second. And then the supporting actor, Ray Fiennes.
We said Ray Fiennes was probably maybe had the best performance over Liam Neeson.
I believe so. But it was that ended up being won by Tommy Lee Jones for his role in The Fugitive, which is a great film. If you've never seen The Fugitive,
sounds like you have.
Tommy Lee Jones. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great one. That's Harrison Ford on the run.
When I was looking into other Best Picture nominees, that was up there as well. And I thought, oh, this is the only other movie I've heard of that's been nominated for Best Picture.
So I was very surprised that a movie like that made it to Best Picture, because it maybe wasn't necessarily an action movie per se, but Harrison Ford was more of an action actor. Knowing that Tom Hanks won the leading actor for Philadelphia, I was surprised that Philadelphia was not nominated for one of the Best Picture awards.
I mean, I think you can have an MVP on a okay movie.
You can, but that movie is good. I'm sure if you looked it up for critics, it probably scores very well. Obviously, there's always, I think you get the Oscars loves giving a few extra points for dealing with heavy subject matter, making a statement with your film. They do love that. It's something the Oscars has always loved.
That's why I think it's just a little bit subjective, and was the original reason why I wanted to have this annual special of our podcast kind of poke fun in it. I didn't know episode 6 we'd be coming out the gates like this with Schindler's List, but here we are.
And I will say, I think our view of the Oscars is, or at least my view of the Oscars, has generally been within the last 10 to 15 years when we know what the best movies are, right? Avengers Endgame was the best movie of the year. Batman, The Dark Knight should have won best. Like we as an audience,
I will go on record and say Spider-Man No Way Home should have won Best Picture. I don't even know what CODA is, but F that
So it's Children of Deaf Adults. That's what CODA stands for. And so it was this movie about
doesn't beat 3 Spider-Man. Sorry, kids. Nope, I don't care.
But that's what I'm referring to, right? That's a subject matter.
If I'm going to make fun of a sensitive subject matter, it's not going to be Schindler's List on this episode, baby.
No, we're not.
It's going to be against CODA. All
and
right?
it's not against, but it's a subject matter that
right.
It makes the Oscars feel good to say that they care about. It's a virtue signaling kind of way about it.
I think we both we haven't spoke about this before, but everyone, and this is not just us, this is everybody who kind of has some sort of disdain towards the Oscars. They're pandering.
Shape of Water. No one saw Shape of Water.
Oh my, get the hell out of here. So a lot of times I feel like it's pandering. And
very
it's
much
like,
so.
Look at us. We appreciate good subject matters. This movie was very deserving though. I'll say that.
A lot of the movies, if you look back in the 90s, it used to have a lot more weight behind it, I think, in subjectivity, especially at a time when everybody was going to the movies, right? Everybody saw at least 5 to 6 movies in the theater every year because that's what you did in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, it's hard to tell because there's so much that comes out on streaming services. There's so much that hits the theaters and doesn't do well in the box office because people just aren't hitting the movies as much. And I think that plays a little bit into the critics. And to be honest, I hate the idea of critics, even like food critics, right? I've never really enjoyed it because I don't like what made you? Did you just watch movies better than me?
Yeah, right.
Is that what you do?
I do want
to. I don't know.
I do want to point out one of these categories that Schindler's List did not win, and that was makeup. Do you see the winner of makeup?
I didn't see the winner of makeup, no.
Okay, well, sorry, Schindler's List. You can take a back seat to Mrs. Doubtfire. You can take a back frickin' seat to Robin Williams playing a female nanny.
Oof.
Are you disagreeing with that decision?
No, I just have a special place in my heart for Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, yeah, no, we love Mrs. Doubtfire.
But it kind of goes back to what I was saying with Ben Kingsley. Like when you make all these actors actually look like what you see some of these pictures look like of these actual Jewish prisoners. Again, I wonder how much of it is we can't have them sweeping 12 categories because we're the Oscars.
And I think that's where there's a crutch in the Oscars when it's the rotation of 5 to 6 movies in every single category.
Yes.
Branch out a little bit, guys.
I hate that there's Oscar lobbying almost, how you have to go and lobby all of these other award shows and a lot of these studio or executives and important people. And you have to almost go like on a book tour, but for your movie to sell it and promote it to critics. Just make your movie, put it out in theaters and let me decide, man. Anyway, that was a tangent that probably should have been 5 minutes ago.
No, this is what this episode is about. It's about how much we don't like the Oscars.
So as I'm looking at the Oscars coming up for this year, first off, it has like 10 or 11. I don't know how many nominations for Best Picture. I'll say this.
They amped it up. They amped it up a lot.
They amped it up a lot. I feel like you're starting to mess with the integrity of now you have 12 movies being Oscar nominated. It feels like they're just like giving out candy to their friends at this point in the game. Or like, oh, we'll give you an Oscar nomination so you could put that on your shelf somewhere.
I'll say this. I believe they expanded that because they wanted to add more mainstream movies to probably gain a bigger audience on viewing. There's been a lot more action movies. I remember a couple years ago, Black Panther was nominated, which very deserving. But I was like, there's no way they're going to pick that. They want to get us interested. The people who just like to watch fun movies, watch the Oscars.
And there was a racial climate around it too. So like you kind of had, and Wakanda was such a phenomenon around that.
Again, it's kind of like the Oscars saying, hey, look at us. We recognize progression.
Yeah, I think they did the same thing with Straight Outta Compton. They gave it a few Oscars, and it's like, look.
Hey, that was a great movie.
It was a great movie. But here's the thing. There's a lot of great movies in that same vertical, in that same category. And the fact that you've never considered a Marvel superhero movie before, and now you're going to do it, Black Panther deserved its Best Picture nomination. A lot of these movies have. And so be consistent, please, because this is what the audience wants, because we like these movies. I will say that if Top Gun Maverick doesn't win Best Picture, it's pretty.
That's what I'm saying. They're putting movies like that in there to appease the broader audience.
If Avatar: The Way of Water,
I swear to God,
wins, I will lose my mind. But there's a lot of movies here. I know you said mainstream. A movie called Women Talking, Everything Everywhere All at Once. I've not seen it. I'm aware of it. I hear it's very good.
Everyone's saying how good that is.
Yeah, apparently that one's a winner,
and I believe it. So that may take it.
The Banshees of Inisherin, Triangle of Sadness, The Fabelmans,
which is another Spielberg movie, The Fabelmans. Yeah, I mean, going back in time to the 1994 Oscars, Nick, the other movies that were nominated for Best Picture, I gotta say, there wasn't a lot of these that I recognized. The only one I kind of clocked was The Fugitive, and that's because it's in line with an action movie. But the other nominees are a movie called In the Name of the Father. The next one is The Piano, and the next one is The Remains of the Day. Now, The Remains of the Day, I believe, we read that in high school. It was a book, and we watched it in class, and I thought, cool, we're watching a movie in class. Couldn't really tell you what it was about. I'm pretty sure it was a butler or something like that. But those are the opponents to our Best Picture viewing of the year for the Just Play It podcast. So, Nick, with these movies on the table, would you put any of these movies ahead of Schindler's List? And why is the answer no?
Well, the answer is no for one simple reason, is none of them are as good. Schindler's List is better. I'd watch The Fugitive again. Right, it's a rewatchability, has a rewatchability factor. And so it's just not as good of a movie. As much as we're talking about the heavy subject matter, I don't want to be like the critics and be like, well, you just win based on the subject matter. The movie's really well done. It's very well done. And I know it's a 3-hour film, but there's no unnecessary bits to it. Right? Everything has weight. Every scene has weight. Spielberg did great. He's just good at that. He really understands the flow, I think, of his movies. The acting was great. And then really just the ambiance, right? All the stuff that they were nominated for and didn't win, costume, makeup, sound, those kinds of things all fit into it. The sound was great. It was almost haunting in a way, whether it was a choir in the background of like a children choir, like kids singing, during some of that one scene I was referencing earlier, where the Nazis are storming one of those Jewish buildings in the ghettos. One Jewish officer is just playing the piano, and it's almost like this happy tune. And there's two guys that are standing there in the middle of all this, two Nazi officers that are debating whether it's Mozart or whether it's Bach. But you're having this massacre happen with this like classical piano music in the background, and it's just really,
it's unsettling.
It's unsettling, but it so fits the movie. I think that happens throughout. So really just all of it. and this is just a great film. And I know critics usually have this landing somewhere in the top 20 movies of all time. I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but it's a damn good movie.
Well said. I was going to comment and also mention, again, I believe the Oscars do pander and they do want to give the award to the best message of the year. But this one kind of hits the nail on the head. And it's a good movie to watch. I was reading something about where critics were possibly saying Spielberg made this just to win an Oscar. And his intentions, whether it to be just to win an Oscar or to share this historical fact in a very gut-wrenching and heartbreaking way, regardless of the intentions, the story was told. The mission was accomplished. We saw how brutal this was. We were immersed into the horrifying images and experience of the Holocaust, which kind of parallels Oscar Schindler's story arc in this movie, right? Like whether he intended to save these people or it just happened, the end result is the same. He saved many people's lives. If Spielberg went out to make this movie just to win an Oscar, which I don't believe, or if he literally made it because he thought it'd be a good story and a good thing to do, the result's the same. He hit the nail on the head. He made a great movie and it won the award.
I couldn't agree more. And I hear this a lot with you hear about historical figures, right? And you hear about maybe they weren't the best guy, maybe they did XYZ. And at the end of the day, I think the net result of your life decides if you're a good person. And I think that scene that I was talking about, my favorite scene, that's what Oscar Schindler was having trouble coming to when he said, I could have done more. And I think he was trying to weigh the guilt of everything that's led up to this moment not being equal to the good that he's done. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, right? It doesn't matter what you did. Like there should be no guilt. If you did a good thing, you did a good thing. I did end up reading something to the effect that whether it was the author or a relative of the author, in some way there was a relationship. I can't remember how many degrees, but between the book and the author and the storyteller and Spielberg. And so Spielberg was lobbied by these people who knew the book, who were connected to the book, to do it. And I think Spielberg read the book and said, I can do this.
Yeah, I do.
So I don't think it wasn't like a screenplay that was being shopped around.
Right. I remember reading something along those lines of Spielberg basically saying, yeah, if it wasn't me pitching this wouldn't have gotten made.
Yeah.
Like, because it's my name and my name's attached to it, this movie got made. And it's not like he was bragging. He was just saying, like, this is just a fact. Like, no one would want to go see this. This sounds like a horrible, depressing movie to watch. Why would anybody make this, let alone go see it? And I do remember he basically said, like, yeah, it was my clout that got this movie off the ground. And it was probably, like you're saying, whoever motivated him or pushed him in that direction to make this into a film. He was kind of one of, I don't know, 5 guys who could maybe do it at the time.
Yeah, and that was the story with the book as well. When I think it was a relative of one of the survivors told the story of Oscar Schindler and commissioned this Irish author. And the Irish author said, this isn't my pain. Like, I can't write this. This isn't my pain. This is your guys' pain. You need to write this. And I think the person who was telling the story said, you have an audience you can get this to. And that's what's important, is to have the story told. And so and then it kind of trickled up to Spielberg to say, hey, I can get this story told.
In an award-winning way. So I think we can both agree that, yes, myth busted. This did deserve to win Best Picture. Kind of going back to what you're saying of, oh, we got to give this award because of the subject matter. I don't believe in that at all. But what you said before, this movie just does a great job of being a film and telling the story. It's just, it's a tough watch. And I'm not one of those guys who thinks a movie's good because it's hard to watch, but just the way, the cinematography, the acting, and Spielberg at the helm.
They did a great job.
Way to go, buddy. We might have to give this movie our popcorn points. I will not be making up my own log line because it's pretty self-explanatory and I don't need to get all comical about it at all.
Nope.
The guy from Taken gets all these displaced Jewish people to work at his pots and pans shop. That's my log line.
Before he sets them free from psychopath Nazis.
And then he gets a tooth ring. And then he cries. So, Nick, let me ask you this.
Yes.
What do you have some sort of, off the top of your head, do you have some sort of system for how you rate movies?
Yeah, I do. And I've talked about this on previous pods.
I believe you said you have boxes that you need checked. So what are those boxes and what got checked in this movie?
Yeah, so this one's hard for me. This one's a little harder for me. So usually my boxes, and one day I should write these down, but my boxes consist of things such as consistency through a movie, right? Looking back at movies we've watched in the past, stealth, inconsistent. There was not good world building.
Horrible.
Last week, Minority Report, great world building.
Fun.
Right? Consistent throughout. I also have things like rewatchability. I have things like enjoyment. I have things like acting. You know, are plot devices convenient or are they well thought out? Are characters developed? Is the dialogue natural? Right? There are all these little things that you go through and you check out when you watch a movie to make it believable, because that's what I want out of a movie. I want it to be as believable as possible. Even in a crazy world like Star Wars, if you make the world consistent and you build it correctly, then I will believe it, right? Obey your own laws of physics is kind of what I say. This one's hard because it is based on a true story, and it's based on a book that has all the subject matter there for Spielberg. So there wasn't really character development in a screenplay.
It kind of becomes non-applicable as far as the story, because like you said, it is based on a true story. So you kind of have to toe that line. But at the same time, when it is adapted for on screen, they do embellish stuff or at least adjust it or smooth things over so that it does seem like it's one cohesive story arc. So
right,
that category is like, take it with a little pinch of salt for movies like this.
Very much so. And I think something you alluded to a little earlier was how recent this was. So this wasn't just a true story that we did research on to find out about. These were survivors and survivors' kids and families told this story to the author. And this isn't just based on a true story. This is told from one of the, I'm trying to remember, I don't want to butcher the name, but maybe like, I think Schindler's Juden, which I think translates to the Jews of Schindler, right? Those 1200. So it's told by these actual survivors. So when it comes to accuracy, I have to sit back and trust that this is just about as accurate as you can get with a true story.
Some light embellishments here and there, I'm sure.
Right. You have to take your artistic license.
Or cinematic tools put to use. I'm pretty sure that I read that scene where they're creating the list. It didn't play out like that. Like Oscar Schindler wasn't pacing around a room naming these names to Stern and he was typing it down. I believe it happened in a completely different way.
No, from what I understand, Stern was actually much more of a mentor to Schindler than worked for Schindler. He was older, wiser, knew more, was almost like a confidant of his. But again, that's all part that makes a movie. So for me, for the boxes that get checked, I have to really go off a different scale on this one and just kind of go with my heart. I'm going to give it popcorn points here. I'm going to give it just a solid 9.0. I think this is just a 9.0. I wanted to go a little lower, honestly. I just, in my heart, I couldn't. I was kind of going high eights, and part of me says,
this is so funny because I had the exact same feeling.
And it is because of the weight and the importance of the film. A few boxes it didn't check for me. Rewatchability, that's not necessarily the movie's fault. That's the subject matter's fault. In today's day and age, this would not be a movie. I was thinking about that. This would be a documentary or a retelling, like a mini series of some sort, because there's probably so much that could go on. But I do have to give it the points for sticking to as much accuracy as possible. And from people who were there and then saw the book, they said, yeah, this is pretty much it. And for those who have read the book and seen the movie, they go, they had to leave some stuff out, but this is pretty close. So the accuracy gives it its points. And then just all the other movie making aspects. Like I said, costume, set, makeup, acting. It's still world building, right? Because you don't know actually what was going on with Schindler before he met a lot of those Jewish people and started that factory, right? You had to really play him up as kind of this playboy, opportunist and businessman. So there was a lot of world building. So I give it a solid 9.0. I will not be watching it again, at least anytime in the next 20 years.
Yeah, 50.
Who knows?
Okay, so I have very similar feelings and fluctuating ratings in that exact pinpoint range. You and me, we're right here. We're together.
Simpatico.
We're right here. We're doing to the two fingers to the eye thing where we're saying, I see you, dog. So like we discussed last week, Rotten Tomatoes is just a percentage of how many critics like the movie. So obviously this is going to have a 98% from the critics and 97% from the audience. Basically,
can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
For the critic score, like you said, it's not, the critics aren't giving it a rating. They're saying, I like it.
They're not giving it a 9.9. This is 99% of the critics saying, this is a good movie. They're giving it a thumbs up.
All you need is a D, right?
All you need is a D. It's a 65%.
So there were a few contrarians. It sounds like the 98%, but I don't know anybody who could see this and say it wasn't a good movie. I don't know what kind of critic at the time would have watched this and wanted to say it wasn't good, because I'm sure there's a little social pressure in that.
And like I discussed last week, Metascore kind of gives you a little bit more of a scoring system average based on critics' reviews. So the Metascore is 95. So that's basically the average weighted score of critics across many different media outlets, and the user score got an 8.8. Our favorite wild card, IMDb, which is, again, the Yelp of movie reviews, it gave the same exact one as you, a 9.0, solid. So for me, the way I rate movies is there a story being told? Is that story consistent? The acting, is it captivating? Maybe the visuals will kind of help it score. Maybe the sound design, or just if it's not so much a gimmick, but is this movie really relying on something else than the story or something else than the cinematography? Is there a unique element to this movie that's driving the score up? For me, a big thing of how I rate movies is entertainment value and rewatchability. But at the same time, I do think you are scoring this on a different scale, because this is a really great movie and it tells a really important story. With that said, it is not entertaining. It is not fun. I would not choose to sit down and watch this again. The way I score movies, I'm thinking, is this entertaining to me, and would I want to watch this again? But at the same time, if that's not the case, what's a good substitute for that rating? And I think a good substitute is, what educational value does this have? What life learning lessons does this have? What should you take away from this movie if it's not going to be entertaining? And for that, I say it does raise its rating a lot for me. Now, granted, I'm not a fan of super long movies, especially if it's a hard watch. So I won't say runtime affects my score, but I was teetering in the high 8s and low 9s on this movie. But I didn't want to fall into that social pressure like you were talking about. For me, I was really fluctuating. I was really having trouble with this because entertainment value is important to me. But like I said, if you're not entertaining me, you better be telling me a very important story. And if it's something where I think everybody should watch it, that'll up your value. I got to give this an 8.9. I was right there with you at the beginning at this pod. I was going to go a solid 9.0, but I think it's a fine line of the social pressure of calling this a really great movie, because it's just a heavy subject matter and it's a very important historical lesson that everybody should know. But, maybe it could have been a little bit shorter, or maybe I don't want to take into account just the subject matter alone. I do want to have some sort of entertainment value be part of my rating. But with that said, it's so well acted. It's such a good story. There's striking images.
Yeah, I think Ray Fiennes' performance itself is kind of what elevated it into that 9 for me. The more we talked about his performance and how well he did, Liam Neeson as well. I just had to go for the 9.
That's why I want you to go first.
Yeah. For me, I have to think, because I have to try to be consistent with my thoughts, right? The only movie I've given over a 9 so far in this podcast was Minority Report.
Yeah, so that's like, and that's apples to oranges.
It's totally apples to oranges.
It's apples to Hershey's chocolate.
It's about as different as you can get. So I have to sit there and I have to think to myself, does this belong on the same grouping, the 8 grouping, as War Games, or does it deserve its place in my mind with A Minority Report? And so for my own intellectual consistency, I have to put it at that 9. Even though my heart is in the high 8s, I have to try and sit there and say, I have to put it in that same category.
When we do look back at it, if we do a yearly review and when it all stacks up, are they going to look at us and be like, did they really put Minority Report above Schindler's List? Something like that.
Yeah.
It's different scales. Just like the Oscars, the best or your rating is all subjective. Basically, you're listening to us spray nonsense every week.
It's essentially what it is.
We're just saying our opinions. And that's how we felt about this movie. Maybe next year's Oscar special will be a little bit more fun. And we'll kind of get to the point I wanted to do, which was to make fun of the Oscars.
Well, hopefully we get Shape of Water next year.
Dude, that movie's getting ripped apart. I've never seen that, but a woman falling in love with a fish man? Come on. We're coming out the gates hot watching this movie. Pretty much like if a really great movie with really well-constructed scenes and acting and blocking cinematography was interwoven with an intimate graphic documentary. Because the unique thing about this movie is that it just kind of goes into 10-minute periods of just slaughter montage. And you're kind of just sitting there like, I can't do anything about this. And
that's where I was saying, I think if made today, this would be either a mini series or a docu-series of some, with recreations.
Yeah, because
of this. There's
like some sort of a audience disconnect at a certain point with just the story being told and just violence. It's just, there's periods of just straight violence, like no words being said, just a whole montage of horrible acts of violence and hatred. And it's just, that's why people don't want to sit down and watch this on a Friday night. But everyone should at least once sit down and watch it in a classroom.
That they should. Well, James, does that do it for us?
I mean, that does it for Schindler's List and this year's Oscar pod. But with the Oscars coming up, let me throw some noms your way, and we're just gonna take some blind guesses. Now, have you seen many Oscar-nominated movies this year?
I'll be honest, I've been a lot more interested in TV shows and even older movies than I have. There hasn't been much this past year that has really grabbed me and said, hey, you need to go watch this. Outside really Top Gun Maverick, I'd say.
Okay, so let's start out with the Best Picture. What movie is winning Best Picture? Speak from your heart.
It better be Top Gun Maverick.
I think we're both in agreement that Top Gun Maverick will win Best Picture, and that is not a joke at all, Wink.
No, it shouldn't be.
I'm going to scroll down to costume design because this includes a movie that I have seen this year.
Okay.
Which is Black Panther. And I can totally see this winning Best Costume. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Black Panther.
I could also see them going for like Elvis.
Yeah, but I don't know. The costumes are so sick in Black Panther.
Yeah, but I feel like the committee might think we gave the original Black Panther its due. I could see them going with like an Elvis. I could see them being like, we did our thing.
Animated feature film? I haven't seen any of these, but I'm going to go with Puss in Boots, The Last Wish.
I can only hope. I didn't know Guillermo del Toro did a Pinocchio.
Apparently he did.
I will say I believe actor in a leading role will be Brendan Fraser in The Whale.
Yeah, so there's this whole thing about...
He's become a darling.
He has become a darling in this country. And there was this whole thing. I believe he did not win the Golden Globe. And it went to, what's-his-face, for Elvis. Austin Butler for playing Elvis. And I believe it was this whole thing for Brendan Fraser boycotting the Golden Globes because of kind of what we touched upon in the beginning of this pod when we were talking about the shady business and like the Harvey Weinsteins. And, you know, I don't know if you've read up on Brendan Fraser at all, but like his poor experience behind the scenes of essentially being assaulted, you know, and all the hush hush. That's why he boycotted going to the Golden Globes. So it's like collusion and some shady business like that just kind of repels me away from award shows.
Mm-hmm.
I can only dream and hope that Brendan Fraser will win Best Actor in a Leading Role for his performance in The Whale. Calling it right now, Just Play It Podcast predicts.
I can dig it.
All right, well, I think that about does it. Should we start heading gone?
Works for me.
Next week, we will be diving into a cinematic universe, but not one that you expect. We'll see you then.